minutes, if you read them, did a phenomenal job to count to make sure, because I don't know how to count. And apparently we have a quorum. Are there any alternates in attendance? If you'll recognize yourself to our secretary so he can get it down, we'd appreciate it.
Castellanos for key official.
Tina Johansson for Rebecca Gomez.
Any other alternates in attendance? All right. Well, folks, we've got a full agenda. You may notice that I reserved this last row for our illustrious guests. We have several of them coming today, so I reserved the last row so that they'd be able to come in, have a seat. When they're done, they can easily leave without having to worry about any of us and our stuff that might be behind us. I wouldn't want them to trip or anything. With that being said, and the idea that we do have guests coming in, if you'll take a look at the agenda, I would like to beg your permission that we might move a couple of items to time certain, because I asked Celeste Phelps and Jessica Nelson to come in at 3:30 regarding the first item under new business, discussion on campus student equity plan and student success and support plan. So if there is nobody that would object, I'd like to move that to a time certain. So no matter what we're doing at 3:30, I would like us to be able to entertain their presentation.
I move.
Second.
Any objections to it? Then we'll assume that everyone is in consensus. Thank you very much. Are there any other items to be added or changed on the agenda in terms of order?
Yes, I'd like to add under new business a discussion on whether or not we're going to support Proposition J. I know we'll start the discussion today on it, but I'm hoping that we could vote either way on it in 2 weeks.
Any other items to be added to the agenda or the order altered?
2 weeks meaning next session, not the 2 sessions, right? Next.
No, our next meeting.
Okay.
All right. Any other items then? All right. Everyone in favor of the adoption of the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Very well. Then let's move on to approval of the minutes of September 11th. Did everyone get a chance to review them? Didn't he do a phenomenal job? Can we thank the secretary for such a phenomenal job?
It was the ghost of Rosalie.
Is that what it was?
I was constantly thinking of Rosalie as I did.
Well, then I would like to entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Now, are there any corrections that we need to address?
There were, I alluded to it, I didn't procure the electronic copies of the public commentary that were made, and then I got them from people, and they will be attached to this when it's sent out as the improvement.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a spelling error at the top of page 4. Above the curriculum committee report, it's part of the UF report. It says the next rep council meeting. Council is COUNCIL.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it will be the second to the last sentence? Is that the one? Okay.
Yep.
Now, there was one other thing on letter J, District Council on Budget and Facilities. I just wanted to clarify, in case I misspoke last time, when we had the discussion about the full-time faculty obligation and the number of hires, the minutes reflect none are proposed for SCE. There wasn't any discussion of SCE positions. It doesn't mean that they won't get any. It's just that they weren't part of the discussion that we were having regarding our full-time faculty obligation, because our faculty obligation number does not include non-credit faculty. So I wouldn't want anyone to read that and read it as SCE will not get any faculty. We do not know. It was not part of the discussion. So I just wanted to make that clear. Any other corrections to the minutes? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? All right. So we're abstaining for Sarah and for Keith. All right. moving on then to public commentary. Is there anyone here for public commentary? Yes, ma'am.
Part of what I was going to say is sort of already been addressed by Gary, because I was going to come and ask that it be agendized for the next meeting that we actually vote on Measure J. And just to give some background, I think it's important, I personally think it's important that we support Measure J. I think it's also important that we are part of what is happening in the district. I had heard for a while that UF had not taken a position yet, that they were still deciding. I asked Dale Craig to let me know as soon as they did. I got an email from him last night saying that they had voted to approve it. CSEA has gone on record as approve it, as wanting to endorse it. I have a request into Candace Lynch Thompson. I have not yet heard from her in terms of what SCE is doing. I will say, much to my disappointment, because I still get the minutes from the Fullerton Senate meeting, the Fullerton Academic Senate voted to remain neutral on this. I personally am very concerned about that. I would like to see our Senate take an affirmative stance on Measure J. And so, but I wanted to give people a heads up so that people can be checking into it, et cetera, for 2 weeks from now so that everybody comes informed. So if there are objections, perhaps we can deal with them at that time. And that was it.
Any others for public commentary? Yes, ma'am.
My
Can
name
we
is-
have your name, please?
My name is Robin DeRue. Against all odds, I teach organic chemistry in the SEM building. Some of you may have remembered on opening day, there was a picture of an archaic lab room that looked like some kind of a robot or something, with like robot arms. We call them the arms, but these are individual hoods for the students. Now last week, one of the arms fell off, and the student was holding the arm, and I said, okay, I'll help you, and we kind of tried to screw it back on, but we couldn't, so we had to call maintenance and operations. They had to take the arm with them, and a welder had to like do something on, I don't know what the little screw thingies are. And then Tuesday, this week, an arm on a different lab bench also fell off, and so the tiny little girl student is holding this arm, but luckily the guys by her helped so it didn't fall on her. We have also, I've come into the lab room where the floor was half flooded. We have water issues in the lab room. I had to cancel the lab that day, and maintenance and operation had to get some kind of big vacuum cleaner, special water suction apparatus. We've had leaks where our student comes in and we think, oh, something's just squirting on the floor. No, it kept going. We used a lot of paper towels that day. So this is the lab room that we are teaching in, and it's definitely old. It's much older than the students. It's just barely working. So we try the best we can. Our students do learn. They're doing the types of experiments they're supposed to be doing for organic chemistry, but in this situation. Some of you also may have remembered an office that was shown on opening day, and that also was my office. I just had office hours, but the students had to meet outside my office because you cannot get a single student in my office with a chair. You could have a student maybe standing there while I'm in my chair, and I don't have a lot of furniture in my office, but I can get in my office, I can get out of my office, that's about it. Also, we have outside where you can't see, you can kind of see there's some tables there. The students sit by those tables, and we have our office hours. And Lori Marvin has a lot of students coming to her for help. So when you have 10 students sitting there asking for help, they're not loud, but there's just enough conversation that if I'm sitting in my office, I can't concentrate because I'm hearing them talk some kind of foreign language in math, asking her questions. So I get a little stressed, and I think I can't even grade papers sometimes because I can hear someone sneezing in the office next to me. I can hear someone on their cell phone. I know everyone's cell phone rings. I can hear Dee way over in the next aisle talking to people about some kind of biology. And so I start listening to other people's conversations because they're all around me. It is a little stressful. I leave my door open because if I close the door, I feel a little claustrophobic because my office it's really small. I'm not exaggerating there. So
Are we to get the idea that you support Measure J?
I'm just telling you what we're dealing with. And just to let you know, I used your restrooms because I knew I was coming to this building instead of our restrooms. They're pretty sad. On the first floor, we have one stall. for the ladies' room. So I don't even go to the first floor because I know that probably if there's a student there, I'm going to be late for class. We have 2 stalls for the ladies on the next 2 floors. So it's definitely an old building. Yeah. Oh, and our shower is like, the safety shower is not in the room.
So if our secretary were to write under public commentary, Robin says,
Please support the measure so that we can get updated rooms and we can do our experiments properly and not worry about flooding, having water all over. And it would be nice to have new bathrooms too.
thank you
Did you
so
also
much.
want that picture to be in the record?
Sure.
Do you have an electronic copy of it?
Mark does.
Send it.
Is that good?
That's great.
Are you happy?
Thank you.
I'm just telling you what we're working with. And our students go to Berkeley, places like that. It's amazing.
Any others for public commentary?
Yes, I would like to make a public
And
statement.
who are you?
Well, my name is Richard Fee. I'm the Dean of Science, Engineering, and Mathematics at Cypress College. And I want to make it clear that as of 2 hours ago, I began my vacation time. I am on vacation, but I think it is so important for us to come out in favor of supporting Measure J that I'm using my vacation time to support the efforts. What Robin was describing, I think, is something that most of our faculty would agree with, that the building does not support the type of instruction that we want to offer. Okay? And I see it as partly a matter of academic freedom. We should not be constrained to teach based on the facilities that are available to us. We should be allowed to teach based on the best of our ability to meet our students' needs. Right now, in our building, there are no lab benches that are really accessible for students in wheelchairs. The ventilation in most of the lab rooms is such that one of my favorite sort of introductory experiments in chemistry is I like to have students light some paper on fire and watch it burn. A really basic, fundamental thing that every science student ought to understand. I did that one semester. There was smoke coming out. We just couldn't do it because our labs do not support basic instruction, let alone more advanced technological instruction that's needed for a modern student. Now, I also know sort of the story behind Measure J and the way that our political consultants have decided to market it. They're marketing it based on jobs, but they're also marketing it based on services to veterans. And that is part of what the bond measure will support. Some people will say that it's a small part and that veterans are being used as a political tool. Okay? Now, let me be clear about this. Measure J is a campaign ballot initiative. It is political. Anytime you engage in politics, the candidate that is the absolute, literal, factual candidate is going to lose. Because politics has a lot of give and take. And sometimes it means stretching the truth. Personally, I don't believe our emphasis on veterans does that. And I'll explain why. Veteran students in our classroom are amazingly valuable. Okay? They provide an experience and a maturity level that our other students don't have and that they desperately need. Our facilities for veterans are, I won't say deplorable, but they are seriously lacking. Okay. I've had veteran students in my office telling me that they really have trouble in their classes because they can't relate to the students, and they have nowhere to go where they can feel comfortable. Our veterans need a safe place, a secure place, a private place, a confidential place on campus to receive the services that they need and that they deserve. In turn, once they feel safe, once they've been supported, they come back to our campus community and provide a valuable perspective that makes the entire classroom better. Okay? It's great to have a veteran in your classroom, particularly one who's had some life experiences that they can share that will help other people mature. Because we are in the business not only of instructing in our areas of expertise, but of maturing students into valuable members of our society. Okay. When, and I'm saying when, because I really believe that we have a lot of faculty that will actively engage and support Measure J. You should go to www.supportourcolleges.com, sign up for phone banking, do what you can to encourage students to get involved in the political process without campaigning, because in your classroom you cannot campaign. But they should know that there is a ballot measure. They should know that they can find resources. And if they are interested in supporting it, they should know how to do that. Okay. There's one other thing, and it's slipping my mind, but okay. It's the phone banking. They give us a script to help us talk to voters. It does include a line about veterans, but you don't have to stick to the script. It's just to help you get over the uncomfortable feeling that you might have calling someone you don't know to support something that they've never heard about. And maybe they care about it and maybe they don't. I believe that you are the most effective advocates for this measure. You are faculty members. You understand our students' needs. I firmly believe as well that you must be authentic to your voice and your understanding of the ballot measure. If you do not think that it's a major emphasis on supporting veterans, then don't say it. Because your honest voice is the voice that's going to sway our voters. And right now, it's potentially a coin toss. The consequences of us failing to pass a ballot measure are such that we won't be able to even go ask voters for another 10 years. So that all needs to be kept in mind as you discuss whether or not you intend to support it. I intend to stay here as a resource in case anyone has questions until 4:45, at which time I have to go get my daughter to soccer practice. And go Measure J! I'm told that this is actually a broomstick for part of our Halloween decorations, but it goes so well with my outfit, and it does look like a pom-pom, so I thought I'd bring it along. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robin, as well. Any others for public commentary? All right, I was given 2 items to read from, one from Dr. Simpson, who could not be here, so it's a very short message. Dear Senators, I apologize for not being able to be in attendance today and appreciate my statement being read to the Senators during the public comment section of your agenda. As you are aware, we are actively engaged in the Measure J campaign that would bring desperately needed resources to the college. A number of individuals, myself and many of you included, have endorsed Measure J. Each personal endorsement adds to the effort we are making, but the most important endorsements come from faculty. I believe institutional support by the Academic Senate for Measure J would significantly advance our cause. Measure J bond dollars will renovate and improve our instructional programs. Measure J will improve the classroom and workplace environment for students, faculty, and staff members. Our vision for the college, as we have articulated in our master plan, cannot become reality without the revenue we would receive from this measure. As individuals, there are a number of ways we can contribute to the effort. Personally endorse Measure J. Register and vote for Measure J. Donate time to the phone banking effort in support of Measure J. As little as 1 or 2 hours makes a significant difference. Make a financial contribution in support of Measure J. Encourage family and friends to support Measure J. Rarely do we have the opportunity to make a significant and long-lasting institutional difference. This is one of those instances. I ask the Senate to take up the issue of support for Measure J as a formal agenda item, and I strongly encourage senators to vote in support of our effort. Your voice as a body needs to be heard. Time is of the essence. Absentee ballots will be mailed out on October 6th. The election will be held on November 4th. We need to act as expeditiously as we can. With sincere appreciation for your dedication to the college and for your consideration, Bob Simpson, President. The other one that I was asked to read essentially was summarized by Dr. Fee. Please endorse yes on Measure J by visiting www.supportourcolleges.com and clicking on the Endorse Measure J button. This type of support, especially from faculty, is important. If you think your individual endorsement won't make a difference, please consider how much impact it has to say something to the effect of 200 full-time faculty endorsed Measure J. Second, volunteer on the Yes on J phone bank. By calling voters, you let them know how important this measure is for the success of our students and the continued development of a skilled local workforce. While the election is 6 weeks away, we are just days away from absentee ballots arriving in voters' homes. We are currently in the process of calling permanent absentee voters to secure their support. Your help on the phones is important to the campaign. Selecting a shift can be completed online. Number 3, talk about Measure J with your colleagues. Share information about Measure J with your colleagues. Because of campaign rules, I cannot, the person who's asking me to read this, send this information to or from a school account. We cannot advocate on school time or with school resources, though we can advocate on our lunch periods, breaks, and outside of our work hours, like on vacation. We can share factual information. Please share my email address or collect their contact information and send it to me so that we can get them involved. Expanding our contact list is important. So if any of you are interested in receiving this personal correspondence inviting you to endorse Measure J, volunteer for the phone bank, and talk about Measure J and being given talking points, please let me know. Yes, ma'am?
Is that anonymous? I mean,
No, it's from a person who currently is working, and this would be against that policy because he's not on vacation.
Gotcha.
So, but we appreciate you being here on vacation. Any other public commentary? Very well then. Let's move on to our special reports until our special guest gets here. Associated students? They're with us? No, I don't see them. All right. United faculty?
So I'm excited to report that we now have a representative representing Cypress's SEM. Richard Fee was kind enough to include me on their division agenda last Friday. And we have 2 volunteers from SEM, Jennifer Koopman and Christina Plett. So Jennifer will attend the Cypress meetings and Christina attended our meeting yesterday at Fullerton. So yay for SEM. Yesterday at our Rep Council meeting, we did vote to support Measure J. Also check your mailboxes. There are several things that will or are already placed in your mailbox. One of them is from CTA regarding the upcoming election for superintendent. So you might have gotten sheets like this. The other is a negotiation survey. We have our negotiating team in place, but the district has yet to put theirs in place. And so while our negotiating team is on hold, they do want to hear from you. So please take a moment to fill out the survey that was being placed in mailboxes today across the district. Every year, a salary and calendar are negotiated. This survey asks you to weigh in on what other articles you'd like to see addressed. You'll need to fill it out and send it to Christy D by October 8th, and the deadline and the information is on here. Also in line with, let's see, we have our newsletter that is just hot off the press, and you will see that in your mailboxes as well, and I can pass this one around so you can take a look at it. UF is holding a voter registration drive on October 1st and 15, and this is thanks to a meeting with Dr. Simpson that was held over the summer to request his support and permission to hold a voter drive on campus. And this is to encourage students to not only register to vote, but to also vote. And so the table will be in front of Tech Ed 2 on October 1st and 15 from 10 to 5 p.m. So please encourage your students to vote. I know AS is also holding a voter registration drive. Oh, yesterday, okay. The National Education Association, which is our umbrella union, is holding a student debt awareness campaign. You might have seen some people with these degrees not debt buttons. And this is the first time NEA has taken on a higher ed issue. So although it's not salary that they're focusing on, the fact that they're aware now of the burden that's placed on students is important. They'll be holding different events throughout the year, and as we get that information, I'll share it. And finally, at our meeting yesterday, there was exuberant kudos expressed to Robert Mercer and the journalism students for providing video footage of the Senate meetings. We heard from many members saying that they truly appreciate having the ability to watch the Senate proceedings on their own time, and some thought they would just watch for a few minutes and ended up watching all 2+ hours. So, yeah, so
They have no life.
thank you.
And it's live right now.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
It is amazing how much easier it is to write minutes.
Pardon?
It's amazing how much easier it is to write
Oh, I
minutes.
bet you've got all these.
Yeah.
So, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you recognize Celeste Phelps when she walked in, but if you don't mind, we had previously decided that at the time that she arrived, we would come down to new business and the discussion of the campus student equity plan and the student success and support plan. So if you don't mind, Celeste, would you like to give us some information about the student equity plan?
Sure, absolutely. Some of the other committee members will be here in the next couple minutes, just so if in case you guys have questions that they can answer that I might not be able to answer. So thank you for inviting me. So we've been working on the student equity plan over the summer since, I would say May of, about May. It seems like it was forever ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. But we started in May. We needed to be finished by November because that's when the plan has to go to the state. However, there are lots of approval processes we have to go through before it goes to the state, and that's the reason I'm here. Did everyone receive a copy of the student equity plan? Okay, good. Did everyone get the opportunity to check it out? Okay. So what we were required to do was to look at different population groups to see which groups were being disproportionately impacted in certain indicators. The indicators were access, course completion, basic skills and ESL, transfer, and certificate and degree completion. The population groups we looked at were gender, ethnicity, disabilities, economically disadvantaged. There's one other one I'm missing. Oh, age group. And then within the last month, the state said we also want you to look at veterans and foster youth. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have we don't have enough data to determine if there is a disproportionate impact for veterans and foster youth, but we were able to determine that for those other population groups. So as you notice in the plan for veterans and foster youth, we did make mention that we know how many foster youth, we know how many veterans we're serving, but we don't have the data to compare to anything. So that is something that we'll be looking at for next year, so we can update the plan. Now, in the plan, we did identify the disproportionate impact. So for access, we found that, and jump in if you. For access, we found that the community has a much larger Hispanic population than what we have here on campus. So that was one area that we needed to focus on, was to welcome our Hispanic and Latino students to our campus. So we did address some of the access activities for that population group. The next indicator was course completion. Do you want to talk about course completion, the basic skills versus credit?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
With the course completion, we did not find any disproportionate impact with any of the groups, but we did, once we started going into basic skills, course completion, which course completion is specific just to the
It was
course.
credit, yeah.
So it's how successful they were in a specific class, not in a sequence, right? So in that basic skills class. So how well did they do in English 58? How well did they do in, those classes? And then we did find that was one place we found disproportionate impact was in complete African American students for basic skills. I don't think it was specific to math or English.
No, it wasn't. It was just an overall course completion.
So we're focusing on that group because there wasn't any disproportionate impact anywhere else in course completion.
And as we were going through course completion, we thought it was really odd, it was wonderful because we thought we're doing such a great job because there are no disparities within course completion credit courses. But we thought there's got to be something, so we dug even deeper to find out where those disparities are, and they are in the basic skills courses, and that's how we identified that. Samantha Simmons should be here shortly, so I'm going to skip over ESL and basic skills and go into degree and certificate completion. We did find that there was disproportionate impact for students receiving degree and certificate completion in our African American population group and Hispanic group. And those were compared to our Asian population, which was the group that we compared those to determine if there was a disparity. And then for transfer, we found disproportionate impact for African American students, Filipino, Hispanic students, students who are economically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities. So there were several discrepancies or disparities within that indicator. So based on what we found, the committee came together and discussed different activities that would be appropriate to address these indicators and these population groups. And if you have the packet in front of you, the activities are there starting on page 43. And we did have to decide who would be responsible for heading off these activities, and also the expected outcomes of each activity. So that is it in a nutshell. I know you guys had a little time to review. Questions that we can answer, hopefully?
Do you have questions,
Yeah.
Celeste?
Page 14, the legacy program,
Yes.
the sentence is not complete. It says learning community is structured around African American experience. It has no period. It's incomplete. I wanted you to add something to it.
Please, okay.
It says experience in the U.S. through cultural enrichment.
So learning community structured around the African American experience in the U.S. through cultural experience.
Through cultural enrichment.
Enrichment, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's kind of left that one hanging.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is definitely a draft. We're still not quite done with it, but the meat of the plan is there. Thank you.
Any other questions for Celeste?
I had a couple questions. First, I was wondering why the group felt that matching the percentage of Latinos in the community with the percentage of Latinos on campus, why was that considered to be a goal that we should be striving for?
Well, because the state asked us to look at the primary population groups in the community. And I believe, and the data that we pulled did show that the Hispanic population in the community was very high, whereas Cypress College, it's not as high as the community. So that's the reason we selected the Hispanic population. We've got to figure out which group is, in all the indicators, which group is performing the highest and match it to that. And that's what we did with the community membership.
There was identified a gap between that percentage in the community and the percentage on campus. Was there an attempt on the part of the group to explain why that difference exists beyond just saying that it was a problem that needed to be addressed?
Well, that is why we have the plan, because of a lot of the activities are inquiry activities that will help us figure out why this is happening, why there are disparities, why there is a disproportionate impact for certain groups. So that's why the activities are not always, hey, let's hire this person on campus to do this. They're actual activities that will help us address the reasons why something is happening.
I think Richard wanted to comment as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, the state gave us a fairly specific description of what they wanted in terms of identifying groups that were adversely impacted. They also prescribed that we should look at our surrounding community, even though we know that at least 50% of our students come from outside of that surrounding community. So that's why there might be some sort of discrepancies there.
The reason why I ask is because it's an assumption that it's a problem. I mean, we have a great school right in our area, Cal State Fullerton, that does a great job of recruiting Latino students. And perhaps the gap between the percentage of Latinos in our community and the percentage on our campus is not because of something bad, but instead because they're going to Cal State Fullerton, which is a good thing. So if you don't explore why this gap exists and you just assume that it's a problem before you even start developing these programs, it's bad research is really what it is. When you assume without demonstrating before you even start that there's a problem that needs to be solved, that's just in general poor research. And so one of my concerns was that there were a number of assumptions made that this is an issue, this is a problem, without demonstrating this is an issue, this is a problem. And I would like to see a lot more of the emphasis in the plan geared toward understanding, is this a problem that we need to address? How do we explain that gap? Explaining that gap should be done before we throw $1.8 million at it as a district. And so that's a major concern of mine in the plan. I also had a concern with picking one group and making them the benchmark for other groups to reach. When you do that, you assume that all of our students coming in the door are equally prepared and equally ready for the task of being a college student. There's no analysis of these groups and their preparedness levels when they walk in the door. So to make a certain group, for example, make our Asian students the benchmark for certain things that we want to do on the campus, that's assuming that all of the populations are prepared the same way walking in the door. There are a number of factors that impact student success before they even step on campus. And to see those not even mentioned in here or even addressed, it seems to me that this is hasty. When you say, well, we want all of our populations to meet our Asian population for this metric, or our Caucasian population for this metric, or some other group for another metric, what you're doing is you're saying that the preparedness levels for all these groups are either held constant, which we know is not true, or you're ignoring that. And social science research and education has shown over and over and over again that this is a multivariate issue. And what this plan seems to do is it seems to ignore all those other variables and instead put the emphasis on what Cypress College is going to do in order to close those gaps. Perhaps, based on the level of preparedness, some of the groups on our campus can't get to that percentage. And the concern I have is that it sets up a situation where we haven't closed that gap to zero. So let's keep throwing money at this and see if we can fix it that way. Maybe we need more programs, maybe we need more money, and this becomes a bigger and bigger part of our budget when you haven't stopped at the very beginning and said, okay, what is an achievable goal here? I think most people in social science, most people in education would say that telling all of to have this goal at the beginning, that all these groups are going to get to this level, is a fool's errand. And that we need to have realistic goals, and that way we don't keep throwing money at a problem trying to achieve something that we frankly don't have the tools to address. We can't go and close the gap in the preparedness of our different student populations for the last 18 years before they get to us. We can't level 12 years of education when they walk into the door. And so I think one of my, as a social scientist and as a researcher, I look at this and I see so many problems with the research process to begin with, that while the goals are admirable, and I'm on board with a number of your conclusions, I see a dangerous precedent being set here where we're going to throw money down a hole without really understanding what the problems are, what our populations are really all about, and how can we best address that, and to what extent can we address it. So I just, I like I said, I like a lot of the conclusions here. It's just, as a social scientist, I look at this and I say, if I were tasked with this problem, I would not get to this point where we start talking about the programs that we're going to develop without identifying the problem. The problem hasn't been identified very well. The assumptions have not been shown to be backed up by data. And when you start off a project that way, you're going to have a lot of problems. I see in the future a lot of difficulty in making the money that we're spending address these problems if you don't know where they are to begin with.
And the committee is absolutely on board with what you just said. That was one of our many frustrations with this plan, because we kept thinking, we need to know why this is happening before we can plan something. The state gave us guidelines to follow, so we followed them the best we could. But that is why many of these activities are inquiry activities, to figure out why these things are happening. In addition to, yes, we have to spend money, and the state is saying, this is how much money you have, figure out some activities that you can do to spend money. But we feel it's very important, as you do, to figure out why these things are happening, why the disparities exist. In the plan that you have, the goals, and like I told Jolena, this is a work in progress. It changes almost daily as we talk about this. The wording of the goals have changed a bit, I believe, from the copy you have. We realize that it's not okay to say, these population groups are going to be performing at this level, such as
in ESL, we took that out as far as the highest performing group was going to be at 60% pass level, let's say, by this date or something. We took all those out. Those are totally unachievable, we thought.
So we changed it
We didn't want to be
to
stuck with it.
achieve proportional rates in basic skills for these specific groups, to at least come in the same area of those higher achieving groups, but not to expect these other population groups to perform at exactly that rate. So yes, this is, everyone can attest here, it was very frustrating to work within these confines and to come up with activities while figuring out why this is happening.
And you're right, I mean, we don't know. I mean, how could our little committee go, oh, they're hunches or assumptions? And we kind of start out with very broad, let's take a year and look into it, and then we're told to kind of, no, this needs to be much more specific. It needs, what are you gonna spend the money on? Where, if you're just kind of doing research, there wasn't enough there, so it was like, okay. So within that, you can see, like, survey high school principals to find out why they're not coming here. Maybe because they're going to Fullerton. You know what I mean? So that they're still kind of in there, but then we were, directed to be a little more specific and a little bit more funding driven, which was difficult.
I think Kathleen had a question.
Yeah, so the second part of this project then is the student success, the SSSP. So from the CTE standpoint, we had some questions as well, because we spend a lot of time going to the high schools and recruiting students and bringing them to the college. And when we bring them here, we're a little concerned to see the first thing they get is an assessment, which can be off-putting, especially for some of those populations that you're trying to bring in. So we're thinking to ourselves, some of these people just want to come in to learn how to fix a air conditioning unit, drive a car, fly a plane. They aren't, while it's important to still have English and math skills, that's not necessarily why they're coming. So they come maybe for a basic certificate, and it looks to me and to some of my colleagues like our students are going to be disadvantaged in the enrollment process because they will not be taking those placement tests. And so you're almost disadvantaging some of the very same people that you're trying to bring in. At least it looks like that's a possibility from the CTE perspective.
I can see what you're saying, yeah. And the state is basically mandating that all new students assess in order to get priority registration. You can certainly opt out, but you will lose priority registration
So I
as
think
well.
it would be important then to tell CTE students that you can opt out, because they are under the impression, it's pretty hit, I have to take the test.
But once you say you're gonna lose priority registration, most of them say, all right, I'll jump through the hoops.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because I talk with them all the time,
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
and so they go, well, all
Well, it's
right.
not a problem, because sometimes what happens is they come in to take a basic certificate with us, like a baby certificate, but then they get used to the idea of school, and then they venture out to GE. Then they're willing to take some of those risks. Whereas if they come in right off the bat and we hit them hard with a test, sometimes they just go, I don't know this, I'm gonna leave.
But you heard what I was reacting
Yes.
to is that
Yeah.
if they presume that their priority registration is at stake, if they don't take it, that's problematic. That's what I'm saying.
Yes,
You know
oh,
what
I'm sorry,
saying?
yeah, okay.
You know what I'm
Yes,
saying?
understood. The other thing, we were kind of curious why no CTE person was on the committee, or maybe there is someone that we didn't see, but we would like to recommend that somebody from either health or mortuary or somebody from CTE be on that committee.
For the,
Student equity or triple SP?
For the triple SP.
we had Kelly Carter,
Okay, that's good, because we.
and we would add Jane, but she's on sabbatical.
I know. Yeah. The only other thing was assuring CTE students that they're welcome to the college. I don't know how you do that, but, or not just CTE students, but all students of all different ethnicities and everything. Sometimes it seems a little off-putting. You have to go to orientation, you have to do the assessment before you can even sit in a class to learn how to work on a car. It just sometimes doesn't seem to follow.
The assessment piece, I can definitely see how that, doesn't make sense. But the orientation or the first semester ed plan, which is also required, is pretty helpful for
the ed
most
plans-
students.
Yeah.
Even starting out, so they can navigate the campus, so that they know what their options are, so they know how to register. So those, those areas I think are, definitely helpful and hopefully not intimidating. But I guess, it is there's a strange shift, I think, going on in the community colleges where And I don't know if it's to say that it's just this moving people through. And it's a little bit sad to not see that at a community college. I mean, I know personally, spending a year or two to just figure out what I wanted to do is now like, you need to know. You got to know in a semester. And I kind of, it's difficult because a community college should be a place where you can explore that, I should hope, but that there's a shift in thinking of what's happening, what's being required of those students.
I think I had Richard and then Kathy and then Mark.
Yeah. One of the things I know has been discussed is shifting it from doing the orientation before the assessment so that they know what the assessment's about. And my hope would be that the orientation, because right now it's really informational, my hope would be that we turn that into more of a welcome to the college and then provide them the information, let them know why. For example, why does a CTE person need to take the assessment, and that it doesn't really affect their ability to get into the courses they think they want, and that we frame that welcoming environment to our students to get them on the right steps. I think the state has really good intentions, because it's not good for a student not to have any educational goals, but they've decided to move in a prescriptive manner, and we have to try and figure out how to make that prescription work for us.
Thank you. Kathy?
I think that's actually a very good suggestion, to do the assessment first. I wanted to commend the committee for putting, and I don't remember exactly where it was, but that you're going to be able, or you're somehow going to process ESL students, hopefully for DSPS issues. And I thank you. I mean, for 25 years, that's been an issue within the second language community. And I'm not just talking about the ESL department. We have thousands of second language speakers on our campus. I'm not just talking about the 700 or 800 that are in the ESL program. But I'm a little concerned. I've always been told that the reason they couldn't be assessed is that they didn't have enough or sufficient English to process to go through all of the programs. So I'm just kind of wondering, we have, I don't know, I have an average of 7, 8, 9 languages in every class I teach. So I don't know how many languages we have, 20, 30 languages. I'm just wondering how that's going to take place. Or is this something you're looking into? It's
something that the committee will look into, but from DSPS and also learning disability specialists, I know how important it is to provide LD assessments in other languages. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to be a challenge to find people who can actually assess in certain languages, but one of our standardized assessments actually comes, there is a Spanish version. So that would be the first step. And I know SCE has just hired, I believe, at least one learning disability assessment specialist who can assess in Spanish. But living in Southern California, it's much easier to find qualified LD specialists who can provide assessments in other language. But I think a good starting point is to find someone who can provide Spanish assessment. And there are certain criteria that learning disability specialists have to look for to determine if the problem is language-based or if it's processing-based. And that's what that person would uncover and discover. So for now, we're going to inquire into the possibility of providing someone on campus who can assess at least in Spanish, and then figure out a way how to find other fluent speakers of other languages provide these assessments. Yeah, very important.
Okay, we had Mark, but I want to remind everyone, we allocated 25 minutes to this agenda topic, and we're right at time now. We are going to be asked as a Senate to endorse these plans, so make sure that all of your questions can be posed to Celeste and Jessica now, so that we will be able to make a recommendation to support these plans. Mark, and then I think I had Jesse, and then I think I had Craig.
Richard said what I would say.
Okay.
He said what I was going to say. Referring to what Craig said earlier, it just bothered me that what he said might be really a real problem, but looking at your summary plan, specifically access, you have some activities, and I think just maybe changing some activities for the type of things that Craig recommended would help. For instance, you have survey high school principals and counselors to gain insights to why students are not attending college. Well, that's a presumption. Maybe they are going to Fullerton. So I think what you've done will work, but you need to look at the activities to see if you can make them a little bit more look into the problem.
Word them as such, word them
Yeah.
more as inquiry into what the problem is, rather than inquiry into what we can do about the problem when we don't know it. Okay, is that what you're saying too?
And on that specific activity, it should say why students are not going to Cypress College. It should say Cypress, yeah.
You could also ask, are they aware how many of their students are going to the other colleges at the same time?
Greg?
I wanted to bring the Senate back to page 8, and this is goal number 2. So this is not a minor part of this plan. Goal 2, course completion, increase African American student basic skills retention and success rates in the next 4 years to 87% and 74% respectively, matching the retention and success rates of Asian students. As yeah, the idea that that is, it sounds to me like you guys are frustrated with what the state is asking you to do. That you realize that there's more going on here than what you are able to do. Which raises a more fundamental question. Why is this kind of research acceptable to the state? The state knows that this is bad research. The state knows that operating under these assumptions is the beginning of a series of bad research moves. And yet, we as a Senate are being asked to kind of approve this, knowing that it has all these problems. I don't think that it serves the students of this campus, or does it serve the faculty of this campus to say that this plan is okay. And further, I think we should be asking the question, why are we being given jobs to do by the state with money attached to it and not being given the resources to do that job correctly? I sense your frustration. And trust me, as a social scientist who does this kind of stuff, I was livid reading this, knowing all of the... If I took this to my dissertation committee, they would have turned me on my heels and said, go back to grad school, go back, spend a few more semesters, learn how to do this right, and come on back. That's what they would have told me. And the fact that this is acceptable to the state is just, it blows my mind, because I know that there are tons of problems here. You know that there are tons of problems here, and yet we just kind of go along with it. We just go along with it. More reports, more work. You guys have other things you should be doing than producing reports that really don't do what they're supposed to be doing. And that $1.8 million for the district, that's a decent chunk of change. Maybe we should be spending that smarter. Maybe we shouldn't be chasing our tail, constructing plans based on bad data that are going to have bad outcomes.
Well, and we do need to update this, look at it at least yearly. So the committee knows that there will be many, many changes after a year. And many more opportunities for other people to be involved with student equity activities and the committee. So we understand that, definitely. This was a huge undertaking and just endless hours, trying to make appropriate decisions and trying to get appropriate data and really look at what's going on our campus. So I feel your frustration, truly I do.
And then with the money being thrown at it, it is a strange, I agree with it, even with the SSSP plan, that there's money being given and then a plan, which is really odd.
Yeah.
It almost should be that you set up a plan and say, here's what money we need for this plan, and it's totally backwards. So it's like, oh, there's a bunch of money. Okay, how do you want to spend it? Shouldn't we be saying what we need to spend and then asking would make more sense? But I mean, it is what it is. But it's a concern for sure.
I think Tina may have had our last question. Think of any other questions that you would need to ask of Celeste or Jessica before you'd be able to form an opinion as to whether or not the Senate could support this plan. Tina?
The statistics, you talk about service area. Are you dealing with all of the students that come in or just the students in our service area?
Which one?
Well,
Access?
Access, yes, let's just use that for example.
Yeah, service area.
Okay, so it is so we could have a lot more Hispanic students or a lot more African-American students, but they're coming in from somewhere else out of our service area and they wouldn't be counted in this, right? That's another thing I think we need to put in there. And I think that Craig's legitimate concern that, the data that we're given is only as good as the information that we know about and those assumptions. So maybe some generalized assume that the schools are graduating this percentage of population to come here to begin with. Assume this. If we can make assumptions or validate those assumptions, I think the data would be much more valid, because I have the same concerns, as well as with Kathy, since I'm over in the health science division. I know that we have a very high rate of people who are actually getting ADT or science degrees, transfer degrees out of our in our specific area and in the nursing area, because they know they're going to have to go ahead with that. And I kind of wonder, it kind of making the students take the test, it is scary. And as a community college person who came from community college, if I wouldn't have had those first while to even look at it, I probably never would have gone on. I think that's something we maybe could have an exemption or identify that those CTE students maybe aren't interested, they're interested in getting a job. Many of them just need a job, not just want a job. They need to support families and stuff. And I think that that's one of the things that, we can't make those assumptions, or we can't not identify that ahead of time and give good statistical data, like Craig was saying. That's all.
Kathleen, did you have a final question?
Yeah, the only other thing would be the assessments, and there's an assumption, underlying assumption, that the assessment puts you into the English class that helps you be successful, but is there any data that has them retested after that to see if they pass that assessment? And have any of us taken that test, and is it consistent by community college? The CSUs and the CSUs have the same test throughout their systems. It's my understanding we have differences, or we're all using the same test now.
It's validated by the math and English departments.
But I mean, that's hard for a high school instructor to teach two different colleges assessments. So even though our department says this is what works for us, it's different by community college. So is there any data that even suggests that our assessment is a good predictor of whether they could pass the English test after they took the class that we're putting them in? In other words, we're putting everybody through this, we're giving them priority registration, and are they actually achieving what we intended by that? I haven't seen that data, so I don't know if it exists, but it's...
Is that something addressed in the plan at all?
Not student equity, no.
Or the triple SP?
I mean, the assumption is that the assessment test does place the person in the correct math or English class. I mean, I have to go forward with that. I mean, I would assume. And certainly, nobody's trying to teach the test. So hopefully, coming out of high school, if you've taken that test, then whatever you placed into should be correct for whatever skill level you're at. So I'm not,
When I was a graduate student at Cal State San Marcos, we all took the Palomar College entrance exam, and 80% of the faculty failed it. So I think if we all had to take the English and math test, we might see similar results. I don't know that that's the case, but I think it's worth noting.
I think it's telling.
It's worth noting, definitely, but it's kind of secondary or another thing to think about that isn't Because the question is, should they or shouldn't they take, it's not necessarily directed at the assessment test in general. It's,
But it's giving priority to people who
to
take
people who take it. But it's really saying, the reasoning for that, and I'm assuming the state's got data that says, students that come in and get an orientation, get a first semester ed plan, and take assessment, do better, move through, are more focused. If you have a student who didn't want to take the math assessment and then finally takes it and gets into math 15 and finds out, oh no, I've got 3 semesters, and they think, why didn't anybody make me do this earlier? And we go, oh, so it's kind of setting that up that, you take it, and then that way you know exactly, you have a better idea of your plan of what it's going to look like to be able to move on or get your degree or that kind of thing, is the thinking.
I think there were 2 more questions,
This
Mark.
is just quick. When I hear all this, from my perspective as curriculum chair, my thought is, Kathleen, and Craig, this is rhetorical, is that this linking of assessment that we heard at the plenary session, we hear at Curriculum Institute, assessment tools statewide for English and math, and then a student education plan. And what your concerns, Kathleen, are that innately the community college also serves disparate, I'm saying a truism, disparate populations relative to their life goals and how the college services those. And clearly to me it's pretty, from my perspective, somewhat of a subjective reaction, maybe apocryphal, is that clearly right now that although there may be money available to deal with special needs populations, the way that they're systemically trying to address it in terms of this mechanism of priority registration really is program completion. That is the population they're addressing. And it may not be advantageous to the range of groups that we service. It may be at best indifferent to, you know what I mean, to the kind of population you're referring to, Kathleen. But to me, it's just emblematic of where the priorities are. If you look at it from a macro level, and that relates also to what you're concerned about in terms of I hear you. I'd like to see, a more laser beam level of research in terms of the funds. And I was wondering, well, we've got this money available to sort of address those concerns, but really our priority, which I'm not saying is, malevolent, it is what it is. It has its limitations. But really our major priority that I'm hearing at the Curriculum Institute here in the plenary session is we've got to get these people on to transfer.
Mark, is there a
And I'm
question
done.
for them?
No, it's rhetorical.
Oh.
They don't have to answer it. That's what my instinct is.
Okay. Then, Renee, is yours a question for them?
It's
Because I want to be confident.
It's just
or
a
considerate of
comment.
their time.
I'm just concerned that ESL completion, on the indicator ESL completion, you have this data analysis chart and findings, and it has other ethnicities. I'm not understanding that chart at all. What is that?
So the other ethnicities,
With ESL.
yes, and that was something that we put in the narrative that we didn't understand as well, going back to the data. So for example, if you're an ESL student and you registered as white, and we didn't know whether or not, how are there white people in ESL? Are they Middle Eastern selecting as white? Or are they Eastern or Western European selecting as white? The same thing with African American, and how African American showed up in the ESL data was another big question that we had, because we have African students who are in our program.
But they're not.
But are they selecting when they're coming up with the first application that they pick, and are they saying, I'm African and I'm in America, therefore I'm African American?
Or they don't even have the choice. There's no choice, and so they're like, well, that's the closest choice.
So these were issues that and some of them, so those were the ethnicities that were represented in ESL. The ones that have stars next to them, there was not a large enough sample, but yet we put it in because it is something that we want to question about, let's say, the application process, and how are students self-selecting their ethnicity? Because we've even noticed within the ESL department that there's variation between Asian groups as well, where you may have Southeast Asian groups that are performing at a different rate than, but again, to make making the assumption. Does that help? No. We had the same questions about why and how people are self-selecting their ethnicity.
Is this particular issue, by the way, I'm assuming that this academic senate is being asked to vote on this at some point in time, is that correct?
Yes. When's your deadline to get it to PAC?
Well, tomorrow it's going to be given to Cherry Lee Bug. But she also understands that it's still in draft form. Next PAC meeting is next Thursday? Yeah, yes. So by then, we're hoping.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because originally you had said to me that you needed our approval by October 9th, so.
Right, and things have been pushed forward.
So today.
Well, and my plan is due to the state on the 17th of October, and I still need to get it to the president and to the chancellor.
So they're looking for our endorsement today, Wayne.
Okay, then second question, since this is dealing with, I'm assuming, not just this college, but the North Orange County Community College District, is there a similar vote being taken at Fullerton College?
Yes.
Okay. And are they on the same timeline?
Yes, theirs will be going to Cherry Lee Bug as well tomorrow.
Jesse?
If we did endorse it, what would that mean going forward?
The way it was
Quite
explained
honest-
to me is that the money would go to Fullerton.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if we don't have a plan for how we're going to spend our allocation, the allocation would rest with the plan that gets approved.
So we're voting on the money whether we like the plan or not.
Right.
Thank you.
That's a good way of saying it, Bill.
And again, as we update the plan every year or more frequently, please, we would love more representation. Yeah, absolutely.
The way it was explained from Fred Williams is they will look at the plan at the district and allocate the money based on the plan. So if we don't put a plan forward, there wouldn't be any money to allocate to Cypress College.
Makes my vote easy, I'm with you.
So.
And I think also, I think the issues that Wayne brings up and several others are really good points. I think remembering that this is a first-time deal, and they're trying to put it and get through the hoops. I think that you have heard what they've had to say. And they're valid points that will be addressed, I would assume, if not in this draft, certainly in the next draft. So, it seems like to me at least it would get us out of the gates. Or gate.
Is there any other question for our guests before I ask that they make sure to sign in so we know who was here? Thank you very much. Any last questions for
We
them?
have some reassurances, like that CTE would be addressed and things like that we've talked about here. I just want to know that that an attempt will be made to do it earlier rather than waiting until next year or the year after. Yeah?
And there are two plans, Triple SP and Student Equity.
Right.
Assurance from
Yeah, it was the
mainly the
SS.
Triple SP.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that gives a priority enrollment.
And
to other
the
students.
strange thing about the two plans is the SCP, the student equity, is goal-driven. Here's what we need to do. Here's what we're doing. I mean, here's some things we have planned. And with the SSSP plan, it's more kind of, what are you doing?
Right.
And, some people, with the BSI, they're like, can you give us goals? I'm like, the plan doesn't really work like that. It's really just saying, the state has said, this is what you have to do. How are you gonna do that? Period. There was no it's very, very strict as to how I can spend that money, what I can spend it on. So I absolutely have no problem having representation. You just might find it's very limiting as to what you can choose to do or not do. But I think that's great. I agree. The more representation, the better, because then everybody can share in that.
Ron, I think you had a question?
I want to address some of the criticisms, at least. I think in spite of the criticisms that you've heard, I think we understand that you had a tough job to do. And I think often when you're applying to these state and government grants, you have to do a lot of things in a hurry, and sometimes you don't get to do it exactly the way it should be done necessarily. So I would think that we should support the plan, and it would be improved next time, or some of the criticism may be addressed. But I think you don't want to throw back money and saying we have a problem and we don't know how to fix it. So I would think we should support it as it is and with the plans that it would be improved next time.
So Ron, when I call for a motion, I can count on you to propose it?
Yes, I would
Okay.
like to move, in fact, now that
Okay.
we support the plans that are both plans that were presented as they are.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second to support?
Second.
Very good. Is there any other discussion that you folks would like to have with our guests present before we can have our own deliberation? No? Any other questions for them? Then I'd like to thank you ladies so very much for coming in. I want to be very considerate of your time. I'm sorry that I took so much of it, but I really appreciate you being here to field our questions. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, Senators, any questions that you would like to pose to each other? It goes to Ron first as the maker of the motion.
Just quickly, I think I want to make it clear, if they want to remain for the vote, they
Oh, yes,
certainly can.
absolutely.
You know, I don't want you to think that you've been dismissed. And I have a feeling that they might be interested in the outcome, so.
Absolutely.
Ron, is there anything else you'd
I
like to
think
say?
I've
Good catch,
stated my position, so nothing more to say.
Okay.
Are we voting for both plans?
Yes, that's the motion, that we would be endorsing both of the plans.
And the other plan we didn't talk much about, but there isn't much to say about this. But it's gonna be we know
This is
what
what
we
you're
have to
going
do.
to do
Yeah,
That's it.
Get that
kind
on.
of is what it is.
with what you've got.
But the upside being, sorry, if I, is that, again, the plan is updated every year. So it's the same thing, it's like, okay, this is what's going on, and then we can tweak it as we go. Yeah, which we will.
Great.
I would like to express that this whole process of approving this plan really has no impact. We're being told either support this plan, which I think many people in this room know is fundamentally flawed, or you don't get the money. So why are we, why was this brought in front of the Senate, and why are we voting on this? Because ultimately, it's not an endorsement of the plan, it's an endorsement of the money.
Yes.
And the thing is, the point that I tried to make over and over and over again is if the plan's no good, throwing money at the plan doesn't work. So I would urge the senators, if you don't back this plan, don't take the money. I know that in this climate we grab for the money, but if you are not going to spend it the right way, and if you don't have a clear plan for how to spend it in ways that address issues, it doesn't seem right to me to just say yes please money, yes please money.
I would assume that would be in opposition. So is there
Sorry.
anyone in favor of the motion? No, please don't apologize.
Craig, so I read this thing. Took a while. There are tools within it that would be efficacious. I mean, you can't deny it. There are tools within it that are efficacious. Does it actually integrate with the student equity goals effectively is yet another issue. But there are enough tools within this that would be efficacious. Although, I worry that, spending 30 minutes, sometimes it takes me 30 minutes to figure out I feel for counseling. It takes me 30 minutes just to figure out what the student's problem is, to help them articulate, and then I'm out of time, and they're gone. But there are tools within this that are efficacious, and I would hate, for us to, because of that, I would be in support of this, even though I'm roiling in my seat as to, it actually integrating with the student equity part of it in terms of the goals, the overall goals of how efficacious it will be. But I do think, in credit to you, there are some really effective tools in here that we really need to start moving forward on, not just for the students that are underrepresented in terms of program completion rates, whether it be certificate or, transfer, but having the tools to promote that, for all the students. even the ones that, are sort of moving along on their own effectively. This would improve them, these tools would improve their success rate in specific tool-specific areas within this. Not holistically, but within this. And I would hate to not spend the money towards that. And I'm done. I don't want to sound redundant. I apologize.
Is there anyone to speak in opposition of the motion? Yes, sir.
Well, I'm opposed to the plans. But Coach, you're right, I'm not opposed to the money. And I've sat in a couple of meetings recently where it is interesting that the trough is now full and we are pigs at the trough again. And we are acting like pigs at the trough, and you in some ways have to. When in a Roman pig trough, eat like a Roman pig. Grab money to increase our base in EFTS, grab money to do these things, which I do see tools. I do see some potential wiggle room where you could conceivably wedge a square peg into a round hole with the money we've bought to maybe actually do something nice with the money. And Craig's right, though. We really don't have a choice about this. Approve this and get your money, or approve it and don't. So I'm really, really opposed to that whole situation. But again, I'm a Roman pig at the trough.
Right.
Does somebody have to move if we vote or not? I'm not a Robert's Rules of Order.
You can call the question if you'd like.
I would like to move that we vote.
Call the question.
I believe he has called the question.
I'll
The
call the
question has
question.
been called.
I'll second it.
Very well. The call for the question is not debatable because the concept of the call is to end debate. All those in favor of the call for the question, this ends debate on the motion.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
One opposed. Any abstentions? All right, we revert to the main motion then. Mr. Secretary, will you read for us the main motion that the senators will be voting on?
As I have it written down, is we move to support both plans as presented.
It has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
I have Craig. I'm not sure if I can count Wayne.
Yep, you can.
I can? Very well. And
Becky today, but I
Tina, who's here for Becky. Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you once again, ladies. You've done a great job.
Thanks, guys.
It was hard work, and I look forward to having many of the faculty that were here today the next time you review the plan. We'll make it bigger, better, stronger. Very well. Thank you. Returning back.
Do you want this plan with the signature page or do that later?
I can do that later with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Back to our special reports. We do not have a staff development coordinator, so we can skip over staff development. Curriculum committee, Mark?
We're doing just fine.
You want to remind us what's super special about Tuesday?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I had that before, so I don't know what I'd do without you. Okay. There's going to be a special meeting. I'm reading right off our minutes. Tuesday, September 30th at 3 p.m. in Business 203. Greg Rutan and Michelle Grimes-Hillman from the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges will be discussing protocols for placing courses within disciplines. The topic is relevant for business that is or will be coming before the Senate. It might be, or might not.
All right.
That's
So if
something.
you didn't put it on your calendar, please consider attending the special curriculum committee meeting. I did
We
send
had a
out.
little bit of refreshments before.
I sent out an announcement telling everybody to come and eat.
Can't take it into the room, but before
Yeah.
we can have a little bit of coffee or coffee.
There it is. Thank you, Mark. Academic Senate Treasurer's Report, Lori. Thank you. Cypress College Foundation. Lynn Mitz is our official Academic Senate rep to the foundation. I don't see her here, so in lieu of her, I'll just mention, check your mailboxes. We got our Pull for Cypress campaign in our mailboxes today. There it is. All right, Basic Skills Committee, Cherie sent me an email, said that there was no report because they haven't had a committee meeting. Student Learning Outcomes Assessment, who is our Sarah? No report. Wow, moving right along. Program Review and Department Planning, Kathleen.
Our first meeting is next Monday, And the reports are due to the deans October 15th, so everybody can start preparing the faculty that's working on it to be ready on October 15th to the deans and then to the committee by the 30th of October.
I've been looking at it, I have to get one done.
Me too.
In some sections, it says, will be provided by the research.
Phil Dykstra.
Does that mean we go to the network to
you
get
should
it, or
have
we call them and they send it to us?
You should have gotten it from your dean.
He said he didn't get it, and I didn't get it, so I thought I had to go to the network and pull it out.
So Dave said, so I'll follow up with
Will you
Phil.
please, because
Yeah.
we can pull it up, it's a lot of
Everyone
work.
should have gotten a pre-populated form that has all the data in
We
it.
didn't get that.
Okay, I'll follow up.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's it, thank you.
All right, that leaves us with District Council on Budget and Facilities. Our next meeting is on October 13th. We haven't met since the last Senate meeting, but I need someone to attend in my stead. I will not be able to attend that day. It's Monday, October 13th from 2 to 4. It's very exciting stuff, folks. We're talking No, it's budget. No one?
I can't get that right.
What's it gonna take? Anyone? Money.
As an incentive, I'll be there.
Yeah, there it is.
You can sit
Richard
next to
Steve will be
me.
there. Did you need a bigger incentive?
Is that a draw?
All right. Okay. Well then, moving on to the president's report, I will tell you, I think everything that Craig said regarding this entire process accurately reflects the DCC meeting that we had on Monday. There is always a question about process and how process is given to us many times at the end rather than at the beginning for our contemplation. And I don't think I could have said it any better than Craig already did, so I'm just going to be quiet now. We need to get to our Robert's Rules presentation, so all of the rest of you can catch up with everything I've said regarding the call for the question and the motion. And our illustrious secretary said that he would do this for me, and I'm really super excited about it. So
I don't want to take 25 minutes to do it.
okay, we got 25 minutes and then 5 to spare.
Right, good. If you'll pass that around.
Absolutely.
That's actually a sheet that is from, I believe it's in your handbook.
Is there anyone that did not get one of these? Okay. I have,
I don't think I did it this freshman, maybe?
no, they were given out at the end of last semester?
I do have it.
Okay. So this one's your very own copy. And this one's on loan.
Okay, this presentation is actually, if I may steal your book for now, this is actually a book report on this book, which is the condensed version of the really thick, this Robert's Rules book, which is our official parliamentary authority. If you really, really want to get involved with it, you read this. If you are attending meetings, you should at least use this. And we as a group, as a group decided that here we should at least do this. So what I'm trying to do is give you a very brief Cliff Notes version of your in-brief book here. And it's actually some of the same stuff that we did last time when I did this last year, but it's good because repetition will build knowledge, right? At least that's my theory. Okay, so the whole thing here is, this is the Senate Seminar on Robert's Rules of Order, or most particularly, who is Robert, why does he have rules, and how can we get out of here by 5 o'clock? That's the most important part of this. How can we always get out of here by 5 o'clock? So this is what I feel like whenever I think about Roberts. This cat to me has the most pissed off look on his face. And so who is this guy Roberts? Who is it and what? Who is he and what is it? Robert is Henry M. Robert. There he is. He's the person who you should hate whenever you deal with this. And if you read your book, you just opened up the cover, one of the first quotes, and it says, in a land where perhaps most persons are members of one or more societies, some knowledge of parliamentary procedure may be justly required as a necessary part of the education of every man and woman. He was writing at a time when that was the case, and what I would definitely say is that everybody in here needs to know at least the very basics of it, okay? So what he wanted to do, this is actually not right. What he wanted to do was to create an orderly process. And the idea that what you do in your meetings, the content of it is the process, and how you handle it is the process, and everybody needs to be familiar with how that's done. And what's the most important, really, upshot of the whole book is that we control that process. It gives us guidelines, but we can bend those guidelines to our need. So if you look at what authority this has, and this is kind of also a review of some of the stuff that we had to do when we were revising our Constitution. In terms of the order of things, what we have to do in here is we've got to follow law, right? We've got to follow federal law, we've got to follow state law, we've got to follow local law. And that famous Brown Act thing is up here, right? It's up in the state level. So anything that's going to follow that obviously has to follow the Brown Act. So then you have district and college rules and regulations. Those college rules and regulations can't contradict the law that's above that. And then we have an academic senate, constitution, and bylaws. The stuff that we have been, we revised last year significantly on the Constitution part, and this semester we're going to be working on the bylaws part of that. Again, Constitution and bylaws have to jive with everything above it, which is why we had to make sure that those brown things were reflected in our Constitution and are going to be reflected in our bylaws. And then you have the rules of order, which is what this book refers to. But there are special rules of order. Those of you who remember, I don't know when this was, probably a year ago or a year and a half ago, we actually created some special rules, which were basically taking the formality that exists in the book and saying we don't have to be as formal about it. That exists actually above Roberts, which is good, because you can say Roberts is too restrictive in certain ways, we're not going to use it that way, we're going to do things differently. It's just important that if you say that you're going to use Roberts as your rule, and you're going to change it, you should make a special rule to it so you know that it supersedes Roberts. And then you have standing rules which go below that, and custom, which is sort of how we had operated before, which is perfectly okay, but again, it's best to take this custom and put it into special rules so that everybody knows what's going on. And when you do things that way, you're sort of committed to passing on the rules to each new Senate in a formalized way. So that being the case, when you get into this book, passing through sort of the introduction part of it, what it basically says is everything we do here is about motions. We have to make a motion, which is how we decide to do things. We get moved to do stuff, right? So I want to look at what that is. It's the process by which we make decisions. To look at it a little bit more closely, and when we're talking about motions, are we talking about motions or are we talking about resolutions? And the way you distinguish those two, and I actually have some problem with this sometimes, but it's all resolutions are motions, but of course not all motions are resolutions. Okay? And what the idea is if you need something to be more formalized, you need something to be of a complicated nature. If you're going to move us to do something and there's lots of elements to it, you should write it down. And it also, if you're affecting a lasting substantive change to something, you're affecting policy, for instance. And I've asked a couple of parliamentarians about this, and the way they describe it, two different ways is ring a bell or ringing a bell. You have rung a bell, you're going to ring the bell, that's the motion. If you want to keep the bell ringing, you're going to do a resolution. Another parent told me, you ground a kid, then that's the motion. A resolution is I'm going to ground you every time you're not home by 10. So there's some sort of lasting policy to that. So, but we essentially are going to handle them and say, with the exception that a resolution, because it is formal, you do have to write it down, and we actually have to have a first reading of it. And you present it, we have a reading of it, then we vote on it the next time. Okay, it's a more formalized thing. So when we're talking about a main motion, that becomes the center of attention. It's the only thing we do. There are things that you can do around it, but when we present it, for instance, Mark moved that we're going to adopt these plans as presented. So when we do that with the main motion, what you do with it is you conceive that motion. You did that off the spur of the moment. Now you can, if it's complicated, of course, write it down. And if you know you want to move us to do something in the future, you agendize it. In a lot of ways, that's sort of what Pat, Gary, and some of the other things we were talking about. We know next time that they want us to do something, right? And we're going to take some action on Measure J. And so we put it on the agenda, and there's a process for that. As you know, we put out a call for that. You either respond to my call or you respond to Jolena, and then we agendize it. And then when it comes up on the agenda, you get recognition. You have to be recognized by the chair to do that, and then what you do is you state your motion. like we did, oftentimes the secretary has to reread it just in case everybody knows what's going on, and then that motion actually becomes official. It becomes seconded, excuse me, let me do that, so that somebody can second, and you don't have to be recognized to do that, you can just say, I second, okay? And then when that happens, the chair states the question, or has the secretary read the motion or whatever, and that's actually when the motion becomes official. It is our baby and we now deal with it, okay? We then have debates about it. We open it up for debates, and then we have rules for how we go about doing that. And the rules that we have for the debate are that we have limits that you can speak when we're talking about a debatable issue. Now, we have more informal discussions that we take place. This doesn't really apply to those. And some of the discussions that we actually had around those, the programs and those plans were more informal. But if we're having a debate about something and we start to go into the back and forth, you can speak 2 times in that debate for up to 10 minutes each of those times. There is also the potential to lengthen those things. There's potential to give somebody time for more speaking. We can always get around that. And that's actually some of the motions that are going to be commonly used that are on the back of that sheet that I gave you. The other thing is that you're supposed to stick to the topic. There's a germaneness rule. Always be debating what's at hand, particularly if it's the main motion. Don't debate, or if there's a subsidiary motion, you debate that specific thing at hand. Don't debate larger issues or things that aren't on that topic. And that's actually one of the jobs that the president or the chair is supposed to have. And then most importantly, and this is something to reiterate in the vein of all of the turmoil we had last year, you debate ideas, you don't debate personalities, right? There's no need to get pissy. So debate the ideas, not the personalities. And then when you actually have that main motion and we've debated, what we then do is we vote, and on a main motion, it's a majority vote. Okay? Now, there are other types of motions: subsidiary motions, privileged motions, incidental motions. These are motions that are like the ones that are on the back of the sheet. I'll talk about those briefly in just a second. But they can be handled when you are handling a main motion, right? And then they become the topic at hand and they become the focal point. All right. So probably the most important question: how do we speed things up, right? How can we actually get out of this room by 5 o'clock, or as close to it as very possible? And there are 2 different ways, or 2 different areas we can break that down into. One is the responsibility of the chair. You have a lot of weight on your shoulders to do this. And the other is the stuff that we can do. What the chair can do, I mentioned this before, it's act like the traffic cop. You keep things moving. Even if that includes, in some ways, walking up to the borderline of being rude. But that's up to each individual chair, of course. And then you also prioritize the recognition of speakers. Has somebody spoke before, and if so, should we let somebody else speak? It's that type of stuff or consideration you should make, particularly with this idea of back and forth. We did that today. I think Gary did a great job of that, as we were talking about it last year, of facilitating this kind of back and forth. And the idea that when we do that, you don't always also have to say, I then agree with that. I am not, as secretary, going to be writing down every single thing that you say. So unless you tell me specifically I want my name on the record to say that I said that thing, you might not have your name on the record saying you said that thing. Okay? So just because you're saying it doesn't mean that it's going to get written up, if that's why you're doing it. And then I think one of the key things too, and this is a difficult one, and it actually becomes one of my pet peeves, and sometimes I close my eyes, but it's recognize one person at a time. Don't have a list. This is this first person, this person, this person. And the reason why is because sometimes those discussions can become fluid. And it doesn't necessarily mean if you're the 5th person down on the line that what you're going to say has to be, I agree with what's being said, because it's already been said. So we're not supposed to have the list of the speakers, who's going to speak next, that type of thing. And again, there's leeway in that, but it can sometimes be a burden. You don't have to have a list of 8 people if they're all going to be saying the same thing. And then we can also do things by unanimous consent. We don't always have to vote. I ask for unanimous consent to do this. As soon as somebody says no, that's obviously not unanimous consent. But that's okay. And if somebody says that and you want to go, wait, I have a problem with that, we can always go back and say, okay, now that's resolved. Can we have unanimous consent to that? And I think that's one of the things with this as we get into our part, what we can do outside of the chair, is we need to understand that we're not intentionally stepping on people's toes sometimes, as we want to kind of get through things. That if you're saying, I'd like to cut off debate or do something like that, that it's not a personal attack on somebody and we're not trying to cut off debate, we're just trying to get through things. So what can we do? Most important thing absolutely is no process. It's the key to it. Do we all know that? Are we waiting for somebody else to move things along? If we know process, we can make a motion to limit debate like Coach had done. Special rules, we can limit debate. I mentioned this last year. There is a common sort of universal special rule which is made. Instead of having a 10-minute rule for limit for debate, a lot of places adopt a 3-minute rule. And the idea is you start with a small amount and then you open it up if you want to. Because there's nothing that says you can't open up debate. You can limit debate, you can open up debate. So if somebody's speaking for 3 minutes, they want to speak more, I move that this person has 2 more minutes to speak. And if you start at a restricted place, it's always nice to open it up. It's just different when you start at a big time and say, I want to restrict it. That gets the feeling like we're trying to restrict people speaking. So it's something we can consider. We don't have to. Well-run meetings and things like that, if we edit ourselves, that doesn't necessarily have to be part of the problem. And I think the use of these subsidiary motions. And I don't have them put up here on the screen, unfortunately. They didn't get that far. But one of the most common things that's going to happen, if you look at motions to amend, we're going to amend things. I have listed here if you want to make an amendment. How do you do that motion to amend? Okay? How do you limit or extend debate? That's one of those things that we're talking about. If you start, you want to say we're going to limit this to 10 minutes. We're going to limit this to 20 minutes. We can say we're going to do that, and then at the end of the 20-minute period, we can always say we're going to extend debate to something. So we can always, we're the ones that control that timing, and we can put those time restraints in place, and we don't have to do it in a way that makes anybody feel like their feet are getting stepped on or that we're being restrictive. We're just trying to more efficiently get through a meeting. If we don't have enough time for what we've done, we'll extend time for it, you know, that kind of thing. Motion for the previous question, that's exactly what Coach did. We were debating, I want to have this thing now addressed, right? I think we've talked about this enough. And if it passes, then that's the issue, right? And you see that each of these have different levels of what you are supposed, it's not majority, it's 2/3 or something like that. It's balancing out the right of an individual to speak with the right of the majority to get stuff done, right? That's the basic idea. Motion to postpone to a certain time. I did that last session with this specific thing. Let me move this to next time let us get to other issues. Now it does say specifically you can only do that to the next session, so you can't sort of put that off forever. And then we can commit or refer, I should say, that we have at times also, we have a lot of discussion that we have to do here. Why don't we create a committee? And then it takes away the discussion that we do here. We get a committee done, they start doing all of that work and talking, and then they can come back with an organized debate. These motions up here are just motions that allow us, the subsidiary motions allow us to more effectively get through the debate and the business that we're doing. Motion to adjourn, you want to do that at any point? Do it. I plan very shortly after 5 o'clock, regardless of where we are being, I'm going to move to adjourn. All you have to do to get out at 5 o'clock is say second and then we vote. Everything, seriously, that's what we do, because we had discussions with people. What is our major objective? Is our major objective to get out of here at 5? Is our major objective to get through an agenda? You want to get out of here at 5? Adjourn at 5. Adjourn in mid-discussion if you want to. And all that happens is, I have to remember where the hell we were at, so that I can write down, this is exactly what was being debated the last time, and what we do is pick up where we were at in that situation. If we're done with what we've debated, we just go to the next item. It just gets rolled over. Anything that was put on there as a new agenda item. What I actually like about putting the measure J on our agenda item today is it gets carried over next time as unfinished business. It's not new, because it's been put on the agenda. So getting it on there and then having it move up and it goes in the order that we have. It's not that you're not going to be heard, it's just that it's going to be put off. If you get put off a couple of times, we reset the agenda every session. Hey, you know, my agenda item has been moved twice. Can I move it up to the top so we can talk about it today? And you're probably going to get that agreed to. Does that make sense? So, I mean, honestly, the adjourn one, that's the one that will definitely get you out of here at 5 o'clock if you want to. It'll get you out of here at 4:45 if you want to. Okay? Points of order, parliamentary inquiry, suspend rules, things like that. Those are also important. If you at any point don't have any idea what's taking place, I have a point of order, I have no idea what's taking place. What are we doing? Or a point of information. Can you give me some information that I have? I just need to, I'm clarifying something. When you have a point of order, it takes precedent. We deal with the point of order. Okay? And we I believe have committed that, you know, no question's stupid in that regard. We want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, right? And knows how they're supposed to do stuff. And then suspend the rules. That's a great one. All the stuff we have. I move to suspend the rule for this so that Mark can talk for 15 more minutes. Whatever it might be. Do you follow? Now, that might not get passed, Mark. So somebody, But we can even suspend them in that regard, right? It's just being familiar with these things, having them even in front of you to look down and say, what do I need to do here? What's the one I need to do to cut off debate? Well, that's the cut off the debate, limit the debate, right? What's the one I need to call the previous questions to get us to end debate? That's that one there too. If you just have it, you want to do one of those things, and then we follow the vote that's on it, okay? But it really is the way that if we all know this stuff and commit to sort of passing it on every single time in kind of an official capacity, we're going to be more efficient. Even if there is some bumps along the way in doing it. But the more efficient, or the more expert we become in this, the more efficient we'll be able to be. And we'll be out of here by 5 o'clock every time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Wow. He even shaved another 7 minutes off of his time. Fantastic. Buy that man a drink. Can't believe that. All right. You got the bottle of water. Now you got the margarita. There it is.
It actually got liquor?
You just add water to it. There it is. Distance education coordinator position. Both Jeannie and Jessica were invited to come to us today. Jessica got sick yesterday. Jeannie had something else come up. They asked that if we were to consider forming a subcommittee, that they be included on it. But I would hope that maybe we would entertain bringing this back to the next meeting when they would be able to attend. Would everybody be okay with that if we brought it back to the next meeting? Jesse?
Just have a point of information.
Yes, sir.
By waiting till next time, what's happening with the coordinator position? Who's filling in or?
We have our CTE dean that's filling in sort of kind of as the coordinator on the faculty, the front side of it. And then they're talking at district of having someone as a content specialist dealing with the back side of Blackboard.
So we're not going to have a big mercy in distance education if we don't move quickly.
Steve might lose some hair. Yeah. He might be pulling out more hair.
He's making our lives, the longer we put it off, Kathleen and I, our lives are much more difficult. That's how you get a teacher. He's
So yes, it's the follicle of Steve that we're sacrificing. So I think he's okay with it. I know that he would really like us to move on it, but I believe that what Jeannie and Jessica have to say is important enough for us to consider this when they are here.
So they didn't want us to create a subcommittee?
They said if we were to create a subcommittee, they'd be interested in serving on it, but if we can postpone this item until the next meeting so that they can be here to talk to us about it, if that's okay. Okay. Then staff development coordinator, I have good news. I had asked President Simpson whether or not we would be able to, say, have a professional expert or maybe 2 faculty members serving as professional expert to kind of get us through this academic year so that we could put together a really strong idea of what we want for our staff development coordinator. I asked you last time to go back to your divisions and ask them about that staff development list of duties and for us to have that consideration about the amount of release time. And Dr. Simpson responded to me today saying that they have indeed identified 2 faculty who would be willing to share the tasks of the coordinator position for this academic year for us to have a complete discussion of what is the appropriate amount of reassigned time, what is the appropriate tasks that should be delegated to the coordinator versus what clerical support should be able to do. So I ask you folks, is that something that the Senate would be interested in entertaining? Having 2 faculty share that position to get us through this academic year so that we could have a more robust discussion as to where we want staff development to go.
I would.
You would? Is there anyone who would be willing to propose a motion that the Academic Senate consider putting the assignment or the, how shall I say, I don't want to say appointment, of a permanent staff development coordinator be postponed until the next academic year and that we use professional experts in that role until then?
Try to write that one out, Brian.
Did you get that?
I move that we postpone the appointment of a permanent staff development coordinator for the rest of this academic year.
Okay.
Using professional experts instead to fill the role of the duties of the staff development coordinator as appointed by our president, Bob Simpson, and our president, Jolena Grande.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, now, maker of the motion, would you like to state your position?
I think it's really neat that we have a couple of faculty members willing to go and fill the void. And I'm not sure who they are, but it's nice that we have a couple that are stepping up to the plate to get us through this so we can have this discussion here on what this position will look like next year.
Anyone opposed?
Are we doing opposed or are we just doing discussion?
No, opposed, he's in favor, so.
Okay, I'm not gonna go to
opposition.
that place.
Brian?
I'm opposed because Mike Flores was one person who wanted to take the job on himself. And what I found, I clarified, he did have positions on committees. What he's been turned down for is every time he has requested a position that has reassigned time or is management type. I do know that is, I believe, an avenue that he is looking to pursue professionally. And one of the ways that you do that is by getting some experience doing those things. And two people combined to do something while we talk about something else, when there was one person who wanted to do it, I completely disagree with that. And am still not quite sure how the first decision is made to say we need a robust group, and then the people who say we need a robust pool then go out and come up with a patchwork way of doing it, which is not a very robust pool. And it's not a very effective way of doing this while we're developing this new thing that we want to do with staff development. So I'm opposed to that.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
The only thing I just don't know, Carrie, I feel really weird about this, if we vote on it before we adjourn, is that I just don't know how much money is set aside for that, and what the range of hours it would be allotted to those positions. That's all. I just feel kind of ignorant. And are these full-time faculty that are adding on professional, which I'm not saying nay or yay or nay, they have a full-time load and they're going to be getting professional expert pay for X number of hours until they top out, and how will that work out relative to their responsibilities and duties that they share? I just don't have any understanding of that. So that's only a concern. So I feel kind of weird voting on it right now today, because I don't have any of that information, and I'm asking to make an assessment if it would be even as to its effectiveness in lieu of having a full-time position for that. That's all. I'm just feeling strange about that. I'm not against it. I just don't know the information.
And I wish I could share it with you. I do not know either.
So my suggestion is that to vote on it seems, I know this has been sitting on the back burner for a while, and we've got to make some kind of decision, but it's hard for me to feel comfortable today. I would have to abstain on it because I don't have enough information. I feel bad about that, but I feel like I'm not being effective in my vote if I don't know. Is it really critical that we vote on this today?
I don't believe so.
Because I would like to know.
I'm
confused.
I would like to tell you that I do
No, I'm
not
not
believe
blaming you.
it's important that it must be done today, but I will tell you, members of the Staff Development Committee have come to me and
Yeah.
said the call for conference funding has not gone out because we
Okay.
don't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
anyone in that leadership position to send out the call, to assemble the packets, to distribute them to the committee members. So putting it off may in
Yeah, I
fact
got
delay
it.
funding for
I got it.
faculty and staff to be able to attend conferences that they would regularly be attending in the fall. That would be the detriment to it.
I get it.
Okay, so we had in favor, we had opposition, back to in favor.
Just a point of inquiry.
Okay.
What is the process when somebody applies for a position? Does the academic senate president decide to move the application forward or not? Or is it at the president's discretion if that person will be interviewed after they apply for the position? Is there a process, or is it just kind of whatever people feel like.
I'm going to defer to our past president, who was part of the process, to answer the question, if you don't mind.
Not having been through it before, I was based on, receiving Michael's, desire to want to be considered. I passed it on to Dr. Simpson. It was Dr. Simpson who felt that having only one applicant was not given a choice to the college. He was not comfortable with that process. And it was his decision then not to move forward.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so there isn't a standard process when people apply for positions with reassigned time. It's at the will of the president then, is that right,
This
Gary?
particular position reports to the president, but if you are familiar with our 10+1 staff development is part of professional development within the academic and professional matters that are the purview of the Senate. So in consultation, the academic Senate president, along with the president of the college, makes the determination. But the position reports directly to the president.
I understand that. I was asking about how the application is processed and people receive the job. Like we have a very, our hiring process is very well defined for other positions. I was just wondering is there a defined process, or is it kind of willy-nilly, however they feel about the applicants? If they like them, they move them forward. If not, they just say nah. So it's kind of more casual. Is that right, Gary? Is that what it is? Or am I not understanding?
I'm not sure based on, I don't think we can talk about all reassigned time positions.
Mm-hmm.
This one only, with only this one isolated instance, I'm not sure I could go and say that is the process or that is normal. I can only say that is how that situation went down last spring.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Just curious.
yeah.
Well, and another question right along those, is the opportunity to apply for this position only available to current full-time faculty, or is it, it is? Okay, got it.
Anyone else wish to debate? In favor?
No, I just have a question as well. So, actually going along with what Linda was asking, so is part of the process that you have to have more than one applicant? Is that something that the Senate established or just the president established?
I do not know the answer to that. I am more than happy to research the issue and bring it back at the next Senate meeting, but that would delay our action on this motion, which I'm more than happy to entertain a motion to postpone. Jesse?
I want to make a motion to postpone this until the next meeting, so we can get more information.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Are there any people who would like to speak in favor of postponing this motion?
I think we need more information.
Okay.
Before we can intelligently vote on this. And what I've heard are a couple different process issues. Is it open to any full-time faculty member to apply for? How will the final decision be made? Is it going to be made jointly by the president of the Academic Senate and the president of the college? And is the reporting requirement directly to the president of the college with a CC to the Academic Senate? I mean, and is the scope of duties possibly going to include some time available to this body for organizational development and staff development of this entity?
I will get those answers now. Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to ask our academic Senate president to take this forward to our president of the college and ask that we perhaps get a process in place to make it transparent so that everyone's on the same page, and that way when someone, because I'm sure this gentleman had his feelings hurt. If nothing else, he may be very angry, who knows? But the situation is I think that if I were in that situation, I'd want to know, gee, you didn't take me, then nobody came forward and you went up and scrounged up 2 other people. And I mean, that's a terrible way to say it, but that could really be the way he may think. So I think it's important to put a process in place.
Okay, so
Thank
I've heard in favor of the motion to postpone. Is there anyone opposed to the motion to postpone? Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if getting the answers that we're asking for is going to change the process of the motion before us today. I see them as two totally separated, trying to figure out what Dr. Simpson was thinking, trying to figure out what the process going forward for next school year to hire a professional staff development coordinator. I'm not sure how that process there has an effect on what the motion before us is today. And so I'm against postponing.
In favor of postponing?
Yes, because the whole crux of your motion is based on information that we don't have or need. And what I'm not getting with that is $1.8 million. So there's nothing at the trough for me to eat, so I'm not going to accept bad without $1.8 million.
Okay. All right. Anyone else in favor of the motion to postpone?
No. Just as a point of clarification, I'm uncomfortable talking about the person's name. And I think that had I applied to be program review chair and not gotten it and felt badly about that, that I wouldn't want my name discussed in this arena.
I appreciate that question. I was not either. I was specifically asked to do so, and he has no problem with his name being out there. I would not have done that if I didn't.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, and I appreciate your concern about that.
Thank you for solving that point because I had no answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. In opposition or in favor of postponing the motion?
Motion to the previous question.
Oh, okay. A call for the question has been made. Is there a second? Okay. For all of those in favor, it's a non-debatable item. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that calls the question on postponing. All those in favor of postponing, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
What are the names, Ron?
We have Ron and Gary. Any abstentions? Motion carries. This item, one abstention, Joel Gober. This item will be carried over, and I will get those answers for you folks and report back to you at our next meeting. That leads us to Senate committee appointments. Folks, the early alert program was overwhelmingly responded to. Like, overwhelmingly responded to. No, I am not being sarcastic by any stretch of the imagination. I was so excited I told the Board of Trustees about it. It was amazing. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people respond to serve on that early alert program. When I told Hideki about it, he saw like, I don't think I'm far enough in the process to have a committee. So he wants to know what Senate would like to do with that. I've got 8 really, really ambitious faculty members that would like to get together on this early alert program. And my idea is if Hideki is in a position where he doesn't feel he's far enough along, maybe that's exactly what these people should be doing.
If we built it, he will come.
Excellent. I will entertain a motion to establish a committee on behalf of Hideki for the early alert program. I need someone to actually present it first.
Okay, I make a motion.
Excellent. We are going to establish for Hideki an early alert program if I can get a second. Fantastic. All right. I am loving how this is working.
I just hope I got that written down.
I'm sorry, my memory's getting bad.
That's okay.
What in the heck is the early alert program?
Okay. We have hired this semester, hold on, I'm going all the way back to what we had at the last one. He was hired to oversee academic probation and dismissal. He is working as a special projects manager on the early alert program. The idea is to capture students when they first begin to flounder before they begin to fail. And the idea is to create a program in place, and it's part of the Triple SP that they were reporting on earlier. So this is where faculty would be able to call up Hideki and go, hey Hideki, I've got these 3 students, they haven't been to class in the last 3 weeks, can you help me with this? And he would be responsible for creating the pathway of interventions that would help them.
We're not debating hiring somebody. We're saying-
No. This is putting together a committee. Yeah.
Those 8 people.
Yeah, yes? Yeah, okay. So all those people that would like to see this, because I don't see any opposition, Oh, fantastic. Then all of those in favor of establishing an early alert program committee to help Hideki create this program?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, any abstentions? I am so happy to tell Hideki that. Now, District Professional Growth and Development Committee. I had 3 faculty members come forward for that 3-year commitment. Super exciting here as well, because I thought, wow, you know, they didn't respond when they had a 1-year, and now a 3-year, and they're all over it. Fantastic. Okay, so here's the issue, folks. I have 3. We need one. So there is one who has agreed for the one-year commitment. That's Renee. She is a counselor in fine arts, if I remember correctly, and I'm not ascribing a different position to her. One of the faculty members is from fine arts. If both of these people have a vote on sabbatical proposals, would that be a conflict of interest to have too many people from the same division?
Yes.
Okay. Then the other two individuals, one of which represents CTE. There is not currently a CTE faculty sitting on that committee, and I often wonder if we don't include enough CTE faculty. The third one is from language arts. So we've got a fine arts, a CTE faculty member, and a language arts.
So we're actually 4 is what you're saying.
No, there are 3. Renee's
Okay,
got
counseling.
one.
Excuse me, I'm done.
Which
Renee?
Well, it's Renee.
So
Sorry, President, choosing to appoint.
Who do you want to appoint? Well,
I would like the Senate's affirmation of my appointment of Nancy Corrales, a health science faculty member, to the District Professional Growth and Development Committee. May I?
Sure.
Yes?
Yes.
Do we have consensus? Anyone in opposition? Okay, thank you very much. Gary, you want to give us an update on academic senate elections? Because I almost did not recognize Wayne, so I'm sorry.
He's a human service professor?
Yeah, I recognize him.
Oh.
I mean, in terms of our adjunct senator.
I want to thank Chrissy Deep and I want to thank Brian Selig so much for helping to go and get these, working so hard to get the election materials out to the adjuncts. They were put in their mailboxes, their ballot boxes in the extended day office. They have until October 4th, Tuesday, 9 p.m. 6th?
Yeah.
9 p.m.
9 p.m. on the 6th.
Yeah. And then we will vote we will count the votes the next day. And we should then be able to go and have the 3 of the 3 winning seats seated at our next meeting.
How many are running?
We have 4 that we're running. Yeah, just one more than.
I'd just like to, observe that there are I think some problems with this process. And it's not and I'm not speaking because I'm personally offended with any of this, but I did not receive the notice of the time period to submit your profile for nominations. I sent Sam an indication that I was interested in continuing to serve. I'm delighted to see that there's 4 people that have expressed an interest in it, and I'm perfectly happy to continue to be an alternate to those folks if there is a provision in the bylaws that allows for alternates to adjuncts. My understanding is until they're actually in place, I continue to be the adjunct faculty representative. I think that the bylaw committee needs to take a look at the timing of these elections and the procedure by which notices are going to go out, the manner in which notices are going to go out. What happened with the spring and the constitutional amendments, the full faculty went through their election process at that time, and then there was a delay until the fall because of apparently an uncertainty as to fall assignments for adjuncts, which would be obviously a qualifying criteria for running. I just think this is all new, and it needs to be really looked at, and it needs to be a fair process for the adjuncts. I'll bet you if you were to take a poll on this campus, there are the vast majority of adjuncts are not even aware of what's happening, not even aware that there's an election going on. So I did go to the extended day office, found my ballot, and I'm going to go ahead and write my name in, which is a mechanism that you can that at least I can be considered, depending on what happens with these other people. I just think my last act, though, officially would be to request that this body take a look at how to make this an equitable and fair procedure. And the timing of the process for the adjuncts has to be more clearly aligned with the terms of service of the full faculty.
Wayne, can I tell you that I would hope that you would continue to attend every one of our Senate meetings, because the voice of reason you provide is immeasurable, regardless of whether or not you hold an actual position as a voting adjunct senator. I would hope that you would be here for the dialogue.
Well, I really appreciate that, and now I'll tell you the truth, I was a bit relieved that I wasn't on the ballot. I am spending a lot of time up in Sacramento now. I'm busy on a lot of other things. What I can say, though, and thank you for that, I will be continue to attend the meetings. Once again, if there's a provision made for an alternate that I could serve behind, and I'm also indicating my willingness to continue to serve on the bylaws committee, because I think that the first step of these whole constitutional amendment revisions now there has to be bylaw amendments and changes that reflect those revisions. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
There already is a provision for adjunct alternates.
Oh, good.
So yes, you can.
Well, so how does that work, though?
You're gonna have to, sort of
Speak to whoever's elected?
text or get by email. You could probably have a pool of 5 or 6 people if you wanted to make sure everybody could always make it.
Okay.
It's probably a good strategy for adjunct.
So I just heard that Wayne said he is going to write his name in on the ballot. I looked at our resident parliamentarian for this evening, because he hasn't called for adjournment yet, if that's the case. So if Wayne wanted to, say, send out an all adjunct faculty email asking others to write his name in on the same ballot.
I am actually not comfortable making a comment on that.
Oh, well, I was
at all.
hoping so.
I'm not saying you can't.
What I'd like to say, Wayne, is I come to the Senate committee meetings because I'm in the Senate committee, the committee you're on also.
Yes.
I'm not a senator.
Right.
But I've let everyone in my division, there are 3 representatives in my division, and when they're not able to attend, they write an email and say, can you please attend? And since I'm here, I'll speak for them. So today I'm Becky, last week I was Jane, or who was I last week? I've been somebody different every week. So it works. I mean, so if you do.
Identity crisis.
No, I don't have an identity crisis. I'm multiple personality.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And that may be an alternative you want to take up with your, with the people who have run and who asked for, if you wanted to, if you're too involved elsewhere, and then just make yourself available in that regard. That's,
Sure.
I suggest, it's worked.
Yeah, and I'm willing to do that.
That way you got to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Then that is our report from adjunct Senate elections. Blackberry temporary Blackboard, sorry.
Temporary. Here's what I can do really quickly on this. It's part of the distance ed coordinator position, and I read the minutes and I saw that the issue of training people coming in from other colleges was already raised, and that's an issue for us as well. It was an issue in program review. The other thing is the length of our training, and the other thing is if you teach a web enhanced class every semester, if you're an adjunct, you have to send an email saying you want your class to roll. It should be an automatic process, just like a hybrid class, and that should be a mechanism built into it. So those were the issues, and I also think that it should be a permanent position. So we can discuss that with the distance ed position, and it's off the agenda.
If you want to be put with the distance ed, we'll just have it as
Yes,
a dual topic.
that'd be great. Thanks.
Then moving on to new business, Cypress.
I'd like to make a motion.
Please, what motion do you have?
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
Really? A motion to adjourn?
Second.
I assume that there will be no opposition? I assume everyone will be in favor. Can I thank you all so much for your time? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
One of the arms fell off, and the student was holding the arm, and I said, okay, I'll help you, and we kind of tried to screw it back on, but we couldn't, so we had to call maintenance and operations. They had to take the arm with them, and a welder had to like do something on, I don't know what the little screw thingies are. And then Tuesday, this week, an arm on a different lab bench also fell off, and so this tiny little girl student is holding this arm, but luckily the guys by her helped so it didn't fall on her. We have also, I've come into the lab room where the floor was half flooded. We have water issues in the lab room. I had to cancel the lab that day, and maintenance and operation had to get some kind of big vacuum cleaner, special water suction apparatus. We've had leaks where our student comes in and we think, oh, something's just squirting on the floor. No, it kept going. We used a lot of paper towels that day. So this is the lab room that we are teaching in, and it's definitely old. It's much older than the students. It's just barely working. So we try the best we can. Our students do learn. They're doing the types of experiments they're supposed to be doing for organic chemistry, but in this situation. Some of you also may have remembered an office that was shown on opening day, and that also was my office. I just had office hours, but the students had to meet outside my office because you cannot get a single student in my office with a chair. You could have a student maybe standing there while I'm in my chair, and I don't have a lot of furniture in my office, but I can get in my office, I can get out of my office, that's about it. Also, we have outside where you can't see, you can kind of see there's some tables there. The students sit by those tables, and we have our office hours. And Lori Marvin has a lot of students coming to her for help. So when you have 10 students sitting there asking for help, they're not loud, but there's just enough conversation that if I'm sitting in my office, I can't concentrate because I'm hearing them talk some kind of foreign language in math, asking her questions. So I get a little stressed, and I think I can't even grade papers sometimes because I can hear someone sneezing in the office next to me. I can hear someone on their cell phone. I know everyone's cell phone rings. I can hear Dee way over in the next aisle talking to people about some kind of biology. And so I start listening to other people's conversations because they're all around me. It is a little stressful. I leave my door open because if I close the door, I feel a little claustrophobic because my office it's really small. I'm not exaggerating there. So
Are we to get the idea that you support Measure J?
I'm just telling you what we're dealing with. And just to let you know, I used your restrooms because I knew I was coming to this building instead of our restrooms. They're pretty sad. On the first floor, we have one stall for the ladies' room. So I don't even go to the first floor because I know that probably if there's a student there, I'm going to be late for class. We have 2 stalls for the ladies on the next 2 floors. So it's definitely an old building. Yeah. Oh, and our shower is the safety shower is not in the room.
So if our secretary were to write under
Political. Anytime you engage in politics, the candidate that is the absolute, literal, factual candidate is going to lose. Because politics has a lot of give and take. And sometimes it means stretching the truth. Personally, I don't believe our emphasis on veterans does that. And I'll explain why. Veteran students in our classroom are amazingly valuable. Okay. They provide an experience and a maturity level that our other students don't have and that they desperately need. Our facilities for veterans are, I won't say deplorable, but they are seriously lacking. Okay. I've had veteran students in my office telling me that they really have trouble in their classes because they can't relate to the students and they have nowhere to go where they can feel comfortable. Our veterans need a safe place, a secure place, a private place, a confidential place on campus to receive the services that they need and that they deserve. In turn, once they feel safe, once they've been supported, they come back to our campus community and provide a valuable perspective that makes the entire classroom better. Okay? It's great to have a veteran in your classroom, particularly one who's had some life experiences that they can share that will help other people mature. Because we are in the business not only of instructing in our areas of expertise, but of maturing students into valuable members of our society. Okay? When, and I'm saying when, because I really believe that we have a lot of faculty that will actively engage and support Measure J. You should go to www.supportourcolleges.com, sign up for phone banking, do what you can to encourage students to get involved in the political process without campaigning, because in your classroom you cannot campaign. But they should know that there is a ballot measure. They should know that they can find resources. And if they are interested in supporting it, they should know how to do that. Okay. There's one other thing, and it's slipping my mind, but okay. It's the phone banking. They give us a script to help us talk to voters. It does include a line about veterans, but you don't have to stick to the script. It's just to help you get over the uncomfortable feeling that you might have calling someone you don't know to support something that they've never heard about. And maybe they care about it, and maybe they...
Good afternoon. It means it's time for Senate. Yeah? How exciting is that? It looks as though we have a quorum. I asked our illustrious secretary, who did a phenomenal job on the minutes, if you read them, did a phenomenal job to count to make sure, because I don't know how to count. And apparently we have a quorum. Are there any alternates in attendance? If you'll recognize yourself to our secretary so he can get it down, we'd appreciate it.
Castellanos for Keith Bishop.
Tina Johansson for Rebecca Gomez.
Any other alternates in attendance? All right. Well, folks, we've got a full agenda. You may notice that I reserved this last row for our illustrious guests. We have several of them coming today, so I reserved the last row so that they'd be able to come in, have a seat. When they're done, they can easily leave without having to worry about any of us and our stuff that might be behind us. I wouldn't want them to trip or anything. With that being said, and the idea that we do have guests coming in, if you'll take a look at the agenda, I would like to beg your permission that we might move a couple of items to time certain, because I asked Celeste Phelps and Jessica Nelson to come in at 3:30 regarding the first item under new business, discussion on campus student equity plan and student success and support plan. So if there is nobody that would object, I'd like to move that to a time certain. So no matter what we're doing at 3:30, I would like us to be able to entertain their presentation.
I move.
Second.
Any objections to it? Then we'll assume that everyone is in consensus. Thank you very much. Are there any other items to be added or changed on the agenda in terms of order?
Yes, I would like to add under new business a discussion on whether or not we're going to support Proposition J. I know we'll start the discussion today on it, but I'm hoping that we could vote either way on it in 2 weeks.
Any other items to be added to the agenda or the order altered?
2 weeks meaning next session, not 2 sessions, right? Next.
No, in other words, our next meeting.
Okay.
All right. Any other items then? All right. Everyone in favor of the adoption of the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Very well. Then let's move on to approval of the minutes of September 11th. Did everyone get a chance to review them? Did he do a phenomenal job? Can we thank the secretary for
It was the ghost of Rosalie.
Is that what it was?
I was constantly thinking of Rosalie as I did.
Well, then I would like to entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Now, are there any corrections that we need to address?
There were, I alluded to it, I didn't procure the electronic copies of the public commentary that were made, and then
Your public commentary, Robin says, please support the measure so that we can get updated rooms and we can do our experiments properly and not worry about flooding, having water all over, and it would be nice to have new bathrooms too. Thank you
did you
so
also
much.
want that picture to be in the record?
Sure.
Do you have an electronic copy of it?
Mark does.
Send it.
Is that good?
That's correct.
Are you happy? Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just telling you what we're working with. And our students go to Berkeley, places like that. It's amazing.
Any others for public commentary?
Yes, I would like to make a public statement.
And who are you?
Well, my name is Richard Fee. I'm the Dean of Science, Engineering, and Mathematics at Cypress College. And I want to make it clear that as of 2 hours ago, I began my vacation time. I am on vacation, but I think it is so important for us to come out in favor of supporting Measure J that I'm using my vacation time to support the efforts. What Robin was describing, I think, is something that most of our faculty would agree with, that the building does not support the type of instruction that we want to offer. Okay? And I see it as partly a matter of academic freedom. We should not be constrained to teach based on the facilities that are available to us. We should be allowed to teach based on the best of our ability to meet our students' needs. Right now in our building, there are no lab benches that are really accessible for students in wheelchairs. The ventilation in most of the lab rooms is such that one of my favorite sort of introductory experiments in chemistry is I like to have students light some paper on fire and watch it burn. A really basic fundamental thing that every science student ought to understand. I did that one semester. There was smoke coming out. We just couldn't do it because our labs do not support basic instruction, let alone more advanced technological instruction that's needed for a modern student. Now, I also know sort of the story behind Measure J and the way that our political consultants have decided to market it. They're marketing it based on jobs, but they're also marketing it based on services to veterans. And that is part of what the bond measure will support. Some people will say that it's a small part and that veterans are being used as a political tool. Okay? Now, let me be clear about this. Measure J is a campaign ballot initiative. It is.
I got them from people, and they will be attached to this when it's sent out as the improvements.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a spelling error at the top of page 4. Above the curriculum committee report, it's part of the UF report. It says the next rep council meeting. Council is COUNCIL.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it will be the second to the last sentence? Is that the one? Okay.
Yep.
Now, there was one other thing on letter J, District Council on Budget and Facilities. I just wanted to clarify, in case I misspoke last time, when we had the discussion about the full-time faculty obligation and the number of hires, the minutes reflect none are proposed for SCE. There wasn't any discussion of SCE positions. It doesn't mean that they won't get any. It's just that they weren't part of the discussion that we were having regarding our full-time faculty obligation, because our faculty obligation number does not include non-credit faculty. So I wouldn't want anyone to read that and read it as SCE will not get any faculty. We do not know. It was not part of the discussion. So I just wanted to make that clear. Any other corrections to the minutes? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? All right. So we're abstaining for Sarah and for Keith. All right. Moving on then to public commentary. Is there anyone here for public commentary? Yes, ma'am.
Part of what I was going to say is sort of already been addressed by Gary, because I was going to come and ask that it be agendized for the next meeting that we actually vote on Measure J. And just to give some background, I think it's important, I personally think it's important that we support Measure J. I think it's also important that we are part of what is happening in the district. I had heard for a while that UF had not taken a position yet, that they were still deciding. I asked Dale Craig to let me know as soon as they did. I got an email from him last night saying that they had voted to approve it. CSEA has gone on record as approve it, as wanting to endorse it. I have a request into Candace Lynch Thompson. I have not yet heard from her in terms of what SCE is doing. I will say, much to my disappointment, because I still get the minutes from the Fullerton Senate meeting, the Fullerton Academic Senate voted to remain neutral on this. I personally am very concerned about that. I would like to see our Senate take an affirmative stance on Measure J. And so, but I wanted to give people a heads up so that people can be checking into it, et cetera, for 2 weeks from now, so that everybody comes informed. So if there are objections, perhaps we can deal with them at that time. And that was it.
Any others for public commentary? Yes, ma'am.
My
Can
name
we
is-
have your name, please?
My name is Robin DeRue. Against all odds, I teach organic chemistry in the SEM building. Some of you may have remembered on opening day, there was a picture of an archaic lab room that looked like some kind of a robot or something with like robot arms. We call them the arms, but these are individual hoods for the students. Now last week,